31st episode of BINJ Live. I'm your co-host, Jason Pramas, Executive Director of BINJ. And let's see if I point the right way in this show. Yeah, over there is co-host Chris Faraone.
Yeah, yes. Man, what's happening? Yeah, I'm excited. It's been a while. How was your vacation?
It was pretty vacation-y. I mean, I only worked some as opposed to like the whole time. So a net win. And you were away for a few days, I think, right? How was that?
I was just driving around a little, went to see some family in New York, the usual, and of course we love working, so it's never a complaint. But
it's true.
What do you there's no retirement. We're gonna do a whole episode dedicated to Chip Burleigh, rest in peace, a friend of BINJ who passed away recently, great activist and journalist, and somebody who really wrote and made websites and spread propaganda till the good kind till the end. And I don't see myself ever stopping. It was something I was thinking about. I was actually speaking with some people from his family and his estate just about just the endless stuff that he has, books and manuscripts and research. So but we are going to have somebody, somebody who knows his breadth of work much better than I come on and really break that down. But anyway, nice to actually be back in full effect. Got some show and tell with me. I don't know. Should we start off with that, or should we go to that later on? You think?
Go right ahead. We don't, we know we're going to talk about some ballot question stuff, some shenanigans from some entertaining stuff from state government, the SJC, and so on. But you had maybe one other thing to talk about, but show and tell. Yeah, let's do show and tell.
All right. So this is from I don't know. She's pretty. I don't know if she would want me to say who I got it from, but a great reporter, longtime Boston arts reporter, hooked me up with some gems, and this is one. I have a whole stack of these. This is a weekly week. For those who are not familiar, these are late 90s satirical newspapers from Greater Boston. And I picked a couple on purpose. So first of all, fans of Eugene Merman, and of course at the Dig and our former newspaper and at BINJ, we are huge fans of Eugene Merman. He's one of these few people who got big and did big things and never, whenever we asked him, he was on the cover of the resurrection issue of the Dig after the pandemic. The guy, picks up the phone and remembers his roots, and part of his roots were having another newspaper, a hilarious one. Anybody who's ever tried satire knows it's very hard to pull off. These are very funny, and by the way, they're also, if you're a comedy fan, they're loaded with just old ads of early Merman shows and that whole school of comedy from the late 90s, just classic stuff. But I brought a couple for a reason, because it's, we talk about the media a lot. So first of all, this one's just hilarious. This one is October 22nd, 1998 and November 5th. The first in October, Jason, you ready?
Yep.
Snakes are everywhere.
Yeah.
All right, snakes are everywhere, and it's government officials, business leaders, and members of the clergy all confirmed yesterday that snakes are everywhere. And then, though, November 5th, just a week later, snakes not everywhere.
Where could they be, those snakes?
An apology to our readers. Snakes not everywhere. Absolutely brilliant. And 2 weeks ago, on the front page of this newspaper, it was reported that snakes were everywhere. After further investigation, we have determined that this story was false. Snakes are not everywhere. The Weekly Week hereby retracts the story and apologizes for any confusion it may have caused. At a press conference yesterday, Weekly Week publisher Ben Dreyer announced the retraction and attempted to explain the source of the mistake. In actuality, snakes are simply in very many places, said Dreyer, whose head and torso were nearly covered with writhing copperhead snakes. Make no mistake about it, there are lots of snakes, hissing, slithering piles of them, biting children, your children. They are damn near everywhere, but they are not technically everywhere.
Everywhere,
but you get the point. And so the other one, though, that I want to bring is really it's so universal yet so local. And this one is from May 7, 1998. And when we talk about, there's a lot of topics that have already been covered on this show. One is the the high-tech city of Cambridge's neglect of the local media landscape. One is on a positive note. Our friends at Spare Change, one of the first so-called street newspapers that covers homelessness issues in the country, and friends of ours. They publish a lot of BINJ material, and this is even back in 1998. Again, for those just tuning in, this is the Weekly Week. This is a satirical newspaper by Eugene Merman and others. Really hilarious. This is Microsoft launches homeless e-zine. Sidewalk.home will challenge Spare Change for Boston area readers. And this is like so ahead of its time. And, it's one of those just beyond irony, but beyond satire.
Well, there was not a dot home then, actually,
Right,
and
yeah,
now there
it's
is. It's
right on. So in the latest in a series of competitive forays into community media, Microsoft launched a homeless e-zine yesterday. The new site, called Sidewalk.home, is designed to steal readers and advertising dollars from lucrative homeless print newspapers like Boston's Spare Change.
lucrative.
Print is dead, said Kevin Hansen, product manager for Sidewalk.home. Spare Change and the other print homeless papers are getting rich off of an outmoded business model, and it's high time that they had some competition. Besides, the net is a perfect vehicle for a homeless zine because the homeless are the ultimate cyber citizens. They're not tied down to one place. They're not constrained by traditional brick and mortar ways of thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, this is so good. As usual, Microsoft isn't venturing into the homeless media market half-heartedly. They've recruited scores of homeless authors, yada, yada. It's so good. There was one, in contrast to other homeless papers, whose homeless authors tend to write gritty testimonials to the hardships of life on the street, Microsoft's authors tend to write gritty testimonials to the power of Microsoft's consumer and business software products. So this is as you even can see, this is an ad. What's this? This is a coffee shop, Iron Lung Coffee House. Is that, I don't believe, still around, or am I wrong?
Was that a thing, or is that a joke? I think it's a joke.
Viewers to strike us down, because it is. But yeah, this is just a really fantastic. Like I said, the ads, the listings, anybody, and this stuff is, let's face it, this is retro at this juncture. Ads for Bella Luna, Hong Kong. My God, Jerry Beck interview. This is,
well, the fact that it's a newspaper is old school.
Here's a great one. This is a one that you'll see in a couple. This is an ad for. There's Merman in there, right at the bottom.
Wow.
Yeah, these are like really gorgeous. But yeah, not to be broken up here. And the other, since we're talking, state of media, what it was, what it could be, what it never will be, I have in my hands here.
Yes.
This is, Jason, what do you think these three things have in common? 1.
Yeah.
2.
Yeah.
These particular issues, and this.
Oh, those particular issues.
You may
Okay.
recognize this one. Do you know what that is?
Looks like an Earth Day one, but I'm not sure.
What, Jason? Are you serious? You're on the masthead of this one. So this is the last ever issue of Dig Boston.
Oh, it is. Oh, good.
Right,
so we were not very happy in that period. So that's April 2022, right?
April 2022.
So it is Earth Day week.
All right, so April 2022, which was, how long after? So this is the last issue of the Improper Bostonian.
Oh, wow.
So
yeah,
this is, let's get a date on that. You want to take a guess?
I think it was like 3 years previously.
March,
like 2021.
2017.
It was that early?
March 2017. I mean, they went online, I think, probably for a little bit.
Yeah.
So this is the last print issue.
Because we picked up Dawn from there, right?
Yeah, Dawn, and and writers as well. Props to really a lot to Jackie and just a whole bunch of people. Jackie Houghton, who did a lot of great big binge editing early, and even not even that long ago. And then here, this Jackie was definitely involved with this too. This, of course, is the last Boston Phoenix print edition, which they'd been a glossy magazine for, I think, maybe like almost a year at that point. This is, where's the date? Oh, come on. Do you want to guess this? I mean, I know it's
2013. I don't know what month.
March 2013. And I think one of the stories about this one is this is like an institution, goes back to 1966. There's more than 100 people work there. I was one of them when it went out of business. People were crying and readers were sad, and and my favorite, and it's just the best. It was so internet era where the first comment under the editor Carly Carioli's letter about the Phoenix going out of business, I think, and it probably may still be up there. It's just someone goes, "That's what you get for putting that fucking hipster dickhead bartender on the cover," or something. Like, half a century of great reporting and all this, just kind of like, just nail in the coffin. So anyway, this was my second show and tell of the day. Just some really great vintage printage, and yes, I'm gonna frame all of these together and maybe get something else. I don't know what else would really. These are kind of like in a class of their own, so I think that frame's getting big enough. But anyway, we can now move on to contemporary media and the challenges therein.
Well, I mean, we're at least doing media. I know you had World Cup stuff to discuss, and we have ballot question stuff to discuss.
I'll do I'll run through some World Cup stuff real quick first. Basically, I want to treat part of this show, whatever it is, as really an open newsroom, because frankly, who the hell has time anymore? We have to make media about the media that we're making, and then we have to make media about that. So I figured
about that media,
some of this, and also if people hear it and you have some information for us, which happens frankly quite a bit, bring it. Because so as far as the World Cup is concerned, my whole message is this: I am well aware, as a spoiler of fun times and as a well-known sports critic, hater, whatever you want to call it, and party pooper, if you will. I know that that's my reputation. I'm not trying to do that here. I really do understand the thrill of not just this, but all sports, regardless of my nonsense and rhetorical flourishes over the years. With that said, sometimes somebody has to do it. Now, a lot of the stuff that we say about the World Cup, our coverage at BINJ, will come after. I see the series as basically the shadow of the World Cup. I'm already seeing the image. It's a giant shadow over the region. And because I mean it when I say region, it's not just Boston. As we all know, it's really this corridor that extends down to Rhode Island. And having covered a lot of things through the years that have vice attached to them, I think it's interesting how much the World Cup gets away with, which is a remarkable amount. Now, what I'm talking about are some of the downsides, some of the not so great story, not just the cop who plays soccer in Government Center, not just the people from all over the world, not just how the Scots are drinking the bars dry, not just how the Norwegians, I think, were, rowing on the escalator like they're Vikings. All fun stories. I get it. I've been there. I've been in the newsrooms where the editor or producer's like, go out. We need 5 fucking World Cup stories today. Whatever. That's not what I'm talking about here. There are other stories, and they really, I know I'm always the crank with this, but they are barely covered. And one of them is human trafficking at the World Cup, which it is a horrific thing to Google for a few reasons. One is you realize how little media attention has been paid on to this, despite, this is not a show. I am not a person where a lot of compliments are given out to government officials, state nor federal. In this case, I got to say, despite the fact that it's happening, even though we know a ton of human trafficking is going to come on the back of this capitalist franchise, right? If we can get past that, right? The fact that it is happening, it's crazy that they have to build in. It's like gambling, right? So we're talking about things that I've covered where, they brought casinos to Massachusetts knowing that X number of people are literally going to become completely addicted to gambling, lose their houses. And then with cannabis, where none of that shit's going to happen, maybe people lose their houses because they invest in the industry, but not because they're smoking it. We have to hear all this bullshit, and it's still prohibition. But when it comes to these other things, like we'll take the World Cup. Oh, it comes with a bunch. There's going to be literally young women sold into slavery in our city. Oh, okay, we're just going to put a bunch of money behind it. Now, not to not to discount entirely the effort here. So one of them is, literally on 6-4, so that Earlier this month, Massachusetts highlights human trafficking prevention and public awareness campaign ahead of the World Cup. There really have been resources. At BINJ, we're looking into additional resources that have been given to groups that work on these issues. You know, they're the ones, trust me, you're not going to find criticism of those groups around here unless, you know, there's something particularly sketchy going on. But short of that, they're the ones doing the work. We're not doing it. My point is that the fact that this is happening, I think, should at least be covered. And of course, other issues like surveillance is something we're looking into. Tons of contracts we have already written at BINJ on how police are on state police in particular, are on a shopping spree. They have devices like stingrays, which are cell site interceptors. They basically fool your phone into thinking that it's communicating with a cell phone tower. Instead, it's them just pulling all your data, your metadata, your call logs, anything they want. Complete violation of the Fourth Amendment and your right to privacy. And these things are all overlooked, but not by us. So that's basically what I'm getting at. And, you know, listen, I think that if you have any actual tips on human trafficking happening, you do not call BINJ. You call the police. You call the FBI immediately. You call the authorities. With that said, if you have a story to share, if you are, you know, one of these organizations, we want to hear. And also, if there are other issues that exist in the shadow of the World Cup, as we're saying, we want to hear from you, whether you're a source or just somebody with an idea. I know there's going to be like mundane stuff, right, that really gets ignored. God knows how many roads will be destroyed, this and that. And I think it's great. I'm not somebody who likes to characterize myself capitalist, socialist, whatever the fuck. I am fine with, you know, downtown restaurants, bars, making money, doing extra business. But of course, what we always see it shifted onto someone else's back. What's suffering? It's interesting enough to see public utilities like transportation, like suddenly we need these commuter rail trains to run perfectly because we have like thousands of guests. What about the millions of people who need them to get to work? These are all the things we just look past when the World Cup's going on. And again, I'll finish this part by just saying I'm not trying to, you know, throw water on all this. That's not what this is about. I'm just trying to say, yo, other shit is going on. Some of it right in front of us.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to decide whether to throw any water on the proceedings to the degree it would matter. Yeah, I guess from us it would be a sprinkle, as it were, of water at the moment. You know, but
I mean, our challenge, I think for me, a lot of the challenge in our reporting boils down to the stupid robot dog, which of course Gary Zabel, who I think one of our reporters spoke to for another story recently, but Gary Zabel, philosophy professor, UMass Boston, once wrote a piece for us about those stupid robot dogs. We should get that in the show notes. But they're a perfect example of like, we're sitting here like, hello, isn't this like the big nightmare we've always had? Number one. Number two, what about all the things? How is this robot dog paid for? What does the robot dog actually do? And everyone else just wants to take a fucking picture with the robot dog. And that's the challenge of our life. If you're out there, by the way, give us money for reporting about the other side of the robot dog.
I imagine that the Russian soldiers killed by the Ukrainian autonomous drone without any human control probably didn't want to pat it in their final seconds. But yes, these issues all need to be discussed. And actually, Gary expressed interest in coming on the show to talk about, you know, AI, or as I often style it, so-called AI. Actually, he was going to debate me about whether or not it's so-called AI or AI. And he just wrote a book on it, you know, that he's shopping around to different publishers. So that would be an interesting conversation. And we could go back to the robot dogs too. So we should do that in the next week or three. Because he does have a lot to say as a philosopher, which is an angle that people don't usually hear about AI from, right? Because he's thinking about what is consciousness, what is intelligence, you know, what constitutes, you know, sort of like some kind of person from a non-person, you know. So I think all these questions are worth chatting about. But no, with the World Cup, it was more like, I mean, I'm sure you heard people kind of saying how great all the Scottish fans were and stuff, right?
They were lovely. And I met a bunch of Scottish fans, you know.
Me too, right? I follow some Scottish YouTubers who were here, right? I even talked to one If I'd known she was coming to my neck of the woods to have dinner, I would have tried to say hello and interview her. But it's not that. It's my usual kind of systemic view, right? Like my immediate question is, okay, how come every Scottish person I see is white? Like every single one that was here that you could see that I saw in many, many, many clips was white. And I was like, okay, I mean, is it a predominantly white country? Yeah, it is, right? But obviously that's changed a lot in recent decades. And cities like Glasgow, I looked up recent stats from like 2021, are like about 75 to 80% white now. So 20 to 25%, different kinds of what they call BAME people, which I guess would be Black, Asian, Middle East. And we say BIPOC here, like Black Indigenous people of color. Same kind of acronym, basically. They also, though, include, the reason I'm fuzzy on that 5% is because they have a category called Other White, which I thought was funny, which includes travelers who are like the kind of Irish and UK version of gypsies, but they're not, I'm sorry, Romani. I think that's the correct thing to say these days. And also Romani peoples, right? So are included in that category, and there are some other sort of groups as well.
Would, like Berbers be included in the category?
I don't know, actually. Like, what goes into other white? It's kind of a weird, way of thinking about it. But so, like, what I'm saying though is that, so I said, well, let me just take a look at, and I haven't written about this, so everyone calm down, right? This is not like a hot take yet, but I'm thinking about whether it should be. Because, like, I don't want to throw cold water on a nice thing either. I mean, it was nice to see Boston happy and people happy about Boston, and that's all fine. And the argument was made just right off the top, like, well, no, it's not like the Scottish people were treated better because they're white, and that the Haitians weren't. They're like, the Haitians basically live here, people were saying in People Land, like on Reddit, and the Scottish were visiting, right? How true that is exactly, I'm not sure. And we don't really have a control team that's hanging out in Boston a lot.
If I was really looking, I mean, we don't get a lot of this kind of stuff because we don't cover like, we're not, page 6 type of stuff, but we're not. I was wondering, people. there's perhaps something, or even the team, the Scottish team has some kind of publicist involved, some kind of media relations going. Well,
they did a great job if they do, but
yeah, it's like the media did it for them. They definitely had a presence, though. Even literally, anybody who's been down, and it's not just them. There are other. And listen, it's interesting. As much as I hate your 5 o'clock news, it is kind of funny watching themselves, and even in the Trump era, bend over backwards to be woke to a certain extent and cover all sorts of teams and cover one step short of covering the anarchists cheering on Iran.
Well, and some certain other kinds of leftists, as we were discussing the other day on the side. What I was getting at, though, is that I wanted to look at racism in Scottish football, soccer, right? They call it football, we call it soccer, right? Especially by fan groups, different fan clubs for different teams. The different major teams that they have in Scotland, right? And it has been a big problem. And there's been attempts by the teams themselves and by government. Scotland has like a quasi-independent government within the United Kingdom, and also the UK government have been trying to kind of deal with it. And a lot of the players are definitely black or brown, as they say, or whatever, like they're not quote unquote white. That's certainly true with Scottish teams, and, to some degree with the national team of Scotland. So it's been an issue. Yeah. And there's been racism from the fans, sometimes really crass, there's no good racism, but particularly lame, horrible stuff being done by large numbers of people, in stadiums and outside of stadiums. And I'm like, well, considering the biggest teams are in the biggest cities, Edinburgh and Glasgow in particular, and the biggest fan clubs are in those cities, and that's where probably the bulk of the people we saw in Boston are coming from. Like if those fan clubs are being, those fans are being racist, a lot of them, the white ones, in regular games, over the many decades, then maybe that might explain why we're, and this is very subjective on my part. Just I'm looking at the many clips of people, and the people I saw in person. I didn't see anybody who wasn't white who was a fan of the Scottish team, and I gotta wonder, like what's up with that,
I don't
So
know. If you're
I don't know.
an intern bringing this to me, you still need, you're gonna have to lock something down.
No, I'm not. I don't know. This is all I have to say about it. I was just kind of wondering because
I mean, the way to go, I think, is to interview some people from, literally people from there. They probably tell you, you find the right person out, and maybe they'll break it down for you, or lead you to a bar full of Black Scottish fans that you didn't know about.
Well, the other thing is that the moment is gone, right? Like we don't usually cover sports, even except for your sort of famous
the shadow. It's the shadow we're covering.
Right. I mean, your Olympics coverage went on without an Olympics. Like you helped stop the Olympics, from coming to Boston, right?
By the way, I didn't make about the World Cup, which is like, we don't really cover the city as much. We really cover the state a lot. And
Right.
as for but I will say with the World Cup, was there not much of a say, with the Olympics, there was a huge movement against it and a lot of these issues. I actually found an article from the Dorchester Reporter, March 10th, 2015, written by Lauren Dzenski, who I believe is at CNN now. And this is about at the time, at-large city councilor in Boston, Ayanna Pressley, who is now, of course, member of the House of Representatives, a well-known member of the House down in D.C. And this is at-large city councilor Ayanna Pressley is filing 2 hearing orders related to Boston's bid to host the 2024 Summer Olympic Games. So, of course, Boston was trying, there were elements in Boston trying to bring the Summer Olympics in 2024, which is back in 2015. They were trying to bring the 2024 Olympics to Boston. That, of course, did not happen. And there was a big pushback from not just activists, reporters like yours truly, but also municipal leaders at the time, like Ayanna Pressley, who were saying, can we at least have to talk about the kind of human trafficking, and not to mention the white elephants, the development projects that never do anything for a city after the Olympics leave. Anyway, that conversation was had. And while I am not on top of everything in the city of Boston all day long, this was more than the city of Boston. The World Cup was just fully embraced. It's like I always say about surveillance. Everyone's like, oh, look how fast I could get to my beach house. I don't have to stop at the tolls anymore. Nobody wants to stop and talk about the unbelievable invasion of privacy and collection of data, storage of data, etc. In this case, it's like World Cup, great, bars open, tons of retail. That'd be, this is great for the tax base and for small businesses. Sure, we're just here to, mention some of these other things. So anyway, throw back to that article from the Dorchester Reporter.
Yep.
But yeah,
and that's
are we going to talk? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, that's as much we deal with sports, ever. So we just like, that 10 minutes.
There was always that stupid NPR show, Only a Game, which I always think is like the nerdiest, like, for sports fans, like only, it's like, that is like such a show for like people who like aren't really into sports, but pretend they love baseball. And, and this is like the World Cup is got a lot of those fans as well. Much love to them. Listen, I've enjoyed watching it a little bit. But there are all these other elements of sports, and not enough that could ever support its own site. So yeah, we dip our toe in every now and then.
But all right, let's see. We've covered World Cup related stuff mostly on your part, and I sort of was thinking aloud about some stuff that I could have covered, but no time, whatever, and the moment is gone. So let's turn to ballot questions. So this is a big ballot question week for the upcoming, elections. We are now down to a mere 9 ballot questions on the ballot, which is the only other time we had that many apparently was in 1994. And it would have been 11 until last week and this week. But, the Supreme Judicial Court in a couple of different proceedings knocked off a couple of the ballot questions. And I don't know, Chris, you want to talk about? I mean, actually, you want me to just
I'll
lead
start
into
with
this?
the one they did not knock off, just briefly.
Yes,
The one
let's
that
do
I
that one.
beat the drum about, which of course is, and we don't have ballot question numbers yet, even though there's like 150 days left to the election. So
Yeah.
we'll refer to it as, an act to restore a sensible marijuana, some bullshit, but basically it is the ballot initiative to end adult use cannabis in Massachusetts, close recreational dispensaries. That is not hyperbole. That is what it would do. It is massively controversial. Could go on and on, but basically the point here is there was an argument brought to the Supreme Judicial Court. I actually went to the hearing a couple weeks ago. Actually, it was in May, and their argument that the language was basically too broad, that it didn't actually communicate what the dramatic impact of such a referendum would be if passed in Massachusetts. We're talking like 30,000 jobs, a social equity program that's been set up, $300 million a year in annual revenue, a significant portion of which goes to recovery programs for opioids and such. So, and not that everything has to be included, but ultimately the Supreme Judicial Court ruled that, hey, guess what? The Attorney General's description is adequate, and it really, honestly, I know I am partial here. It's such fucking garbage. It's so vague. The polling has shown that people really don't understand it, and that the consequences and really what it does. But ultimately the ruling is like, this is enough. People have to do some of their own research, and it's really unfortunate. And I think in the context of, or juxtaposed by the other cases we're about to talk about, it really just does seem, I know no matter what, I'm going to sound like a ranting stoner who's just pissed off because legal cannabis is under threat. And I am, but I got to say, it's really interesting when money is involved, or taxes, even though tax revenue is involved here, when it's directly related to taxes, or, as I can't wait to hear what you have to say about today, the big news is that they knocked off the rent control ballot measure, which is just a much bigger thing, even more consequential. So,
well, I mean, both the ones that got
30-year history. Give us the 50-year history of rent control.
No way. I'm not doing that today. We'll have experts on to do that. But I was going to say, it's funny that, for the cannabis ballot question, that they thought, the SJC thought that Attorney General Andrea Campbell's description was adequate, whereas with the income tax ballot question, they thought it was inadequate, right? Although I think it seems to me the more significant reason they shot down that ballot question by, obviously like hyper-capitalist conservative elements and stuff who are like, we pay so many taxes here in Massachusetts, like in the US, which is laughable, So we're going to cut the income tax rate. And I'm talking about rich people, folks, in case you're not getting why I'm being kind of sarcastic. We'll cut the income tax rate from 5 to 4%. Oh, but we're not going to say that we're also cutting the capital gains tax rate, but the same amount.
One. Just to be clear, this is not the rent control one. This is another
one.
No,
that's right. I'm saying this is interesting compared to the cannabis question, because both were either upheld in the case of the cannabis ballot question, or struck down in the case of the income tax question, because of Attorney General Andrea Campbell's description that people were going to see right on the ballot. And they had opposite reactions to the two. Like you're saying, how could they possibly not, go along with Campbell's description when it just didn't lay it right out? Like this is all about getting rid of recreational cannabis, like in giant capital letters, right? Which is really what it should. Right?
And my frustration is compounded by not just the SJC, and I'm not going to be an ignorant curmudgeon here. I understand that these are different fights, but really the aggravation stems from, this is a campaign, the so-called a campaign for a coalition for a healthy Massachusetts that is pushing this nonsense initiative to repeal adult use cannabis in Massachusetts, they have, and up till today, because they need another round of ballots, signatures to collect, about 12,000 to get on the ballot in November. Right now, every day we're getting reports. They're out. They have signature gatherers outside of places like Market Basket, and they are collecting. So they're lying to people. They're getting.
Well, now they can say whatever they want, Chris.
They
you know,
can. It's
so they just
protected speech to lie to people about what they're signing. Even the organizers have said, if somebody signs something and they didn't understand, they didn't read the fine print, it's on them. So that is
too bad, right?
That's what we're contending with. And so I understand that is not what the SJC was ruling on, but the fact that they could just bullshit their way all the way to the ballot, whereas these other initiatives and rent control that we're going to talk about is the really unbelievable example where, wow, so it turns out in some cases the minutiae do matter. But in the case of the one that is consequential to, me and the things that the topic that I cover regularly, it's just, so I understand.
In both the questions that were just struck down, the minutiae mattered.
Right. So I understand that I am being to a degree naive. I also am not naive. I was there. I listened to the arguments. I actually listened to the arguments about some of these other cases and did find them compelling. And this whole thing is interesting on all sides, even the parts that are disappointing. But I think no matter what, this is talk about minutiae. This is really inside baseball, but I'm glad that people are getting to see a little bit more of it than usual, even if it's just, a couple more 100 or 1,000 are amplified to them through a show like this. This is where it's at. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is how shit gets done, kind of, in Massachusetts, at least. As we know, the legislature, like in the case of the audit, that doesn't always, make the wishes of the constituents come true. But in this case, we're not in that point yet. We still need people to vote on these things if they make it to the ballot, which rent control did not. So, Jason, can you just give us a little rundown on that one?
Well, I mean, first of all, just to finish up with the income tax thing, it would have been really bad for regular people, for working people, or if middle-class people insist upon being thought of differently than, working class people, working and middle-class people. Okay, most everybody in Massachusetts at a time when the feds have already cut, huge amounts of money from every decent program that helps regular people, cutting a huge amount of taxes out of the Massachusetts tax base at this moment in particular is the worst possible thing that could have happened. So, I'm certainly glad it got shot down. But yeah, rent control, that was one that was certainly going to benefit a lot of people. I mean, I'm a renter, right? And I had some issues with this particular, the language of this particular question and stuff like that, as did apparently many people who are advocates of rent control and other kinds of housing reform to get more housing built, ideally, social housing, meaning multi-class public housing, which is what we really need in the society. And we've talked about that in other shows. We can talk about it more some other time. But whatever, I mean, this question got shot down on a real technicality, right? The basic thing was, and as with the income tax ballot question, it was shot down on a finer point within Article 48 of the Massachusetts Constitution, which governs ballot questions. Same thing with the rent control ballot question. In this case, the authors, the different housing groups, labor groups, and so on that were pushing for it, some religious groups, added an exemption for what amount to different kinds of nonprofit organizations. But as one of the SJC justices said, in his decision, if they had just said nonprofit sort of housing is exempt like that, it would have been fine. Like the other grounds that the real estate industry was trying to torpedo, because folks should understand, opponents of these ballot questions will go to court, right? That's a common response. So what happens in the case of the income tax ballot question and the rent control ballot question? There were suits brought to bring these questions down. And in both cases, they were successful. So the real estate industry, which has different sectors, but the big developers and stuff were definitely on point here. The big real estate, sort of organizations were on point here. They were suing. They were throwing everything they could to like bring down this question. But the one thing that stuck was the fact that the bill said that properties owned by religious groups were exempt from the rent control ballot question. And for those of you unfamiliar with it, it basically would have pegged annual rent increases to either the percentage of the consumer price index for that year, or 5%, whichever was lower. And that's quite a bit less of an increase than other proposals for rent control over the years, right? Like Mayor Wu's, I think, was basically around 10%. I think with a similar CPI trigger or whatever as the alternative. But so therefore, the less that landlords would be allowed to raise rent, the more they go crazy about it. Even though in all these cases, they're still going to make money, right? And they're always going to cry poverty. I mean, this is their thing. And what was very interesting to me about the effect of this proposal clearing, getting enough signatures to get on the ballot, which is only the first of a number of hurdles that it has to get through to get on the ballot, right? And of course, lawsuits are one such hurdle that usually come up. But it was interesting that the solidarity between different parts of the real estate industry was starting to fall apart. And the biggest players were negotiating, folks may have noticed in the news, a compromise in the legislature, right? Because all along, at any moment, by the way, the Massachusetts legislature could have done stuff,
I got to say,
for rent control.
You're on a roll here. I just got it for the.
No, come in.
No, the most. It is so. When you even read the somewhat objective reports on this stuff, like even the assumptions, like there's no secret here. The Massachusetts legislature almost like exists for no reason other than to carry water for landlords, for owners. It's so, and in this, it's so beyond transparent. It's crazy how even open they are. They have the same talking points. They're all their donors, the millions in lobbying. And I think it's interesting. They really have to eat shit on this. And I got to say, we keep sending these people back to these offices, the power brokers. They are so shameless on something like this. They are smoking cigars tonight.
Yeah. Well, let's look at what's going to happen. So what's been happening is you got this point where whatever you want to say about this particular ballot question from the left, like, whatever your particular version of kind of broad-spirited, small d democratic housing policy is that benefits regular people, right? Those forces rarely have any leverage in a political institution like the one we're discussing. That's very much in the pocket of landlords and developers. Like that has been the case. It's one of the major constituents that puts a lot of money, into campaigns and can get people elected or unelected. You know what I mean? The real estate industry has a lot of power. And what was fascinating, though, is that there was enough leverage generated by this ballot question that the solidarity between different wings of the real estate industry was starting to fracture. So you actually had some of the biggest players, I actually made note of it here. If I lift the page up, oh darn, I didn't. Because even I don't remember all these groups, but like the Greater Boston Real Estate Board and a couple of other, big coalitions of landlords, including the biggest developers, NAICOP, I think it's called, which is, let me just check my notes, NAIOP, pardon me, which is the Commercial Real Estate Development Association. These kinds of big groups of big landlords and developers and stuff. We're going to the table with kind of a motley crew of housing advocates and labor folks and, and others, sort of in meetings that were presided over by Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll. And the word coming out of those meetings, some of it I heard on the side, some of it through the press, it was obviously that the real estate industry still had the advantage, and advocates weren't going to get everything they would have gotten in the ballot questions, but still, Chris, myself, any of us that have ever watched this, anybody who's lived in Massachusetts for, 1 year or decades, we've never seen the real estate industry do anything but say, we will not negotiate with terrorists. Like anyone that tries to change anything about the way real estate is done, particularly rentals, we're not going to have it. It's not going to happen. We're going to spend however much it costs to stop it, and they usually have, right? That's how they got rid of rent control in 1994 in the first place. And I had rent control when they got rid of it. It practically threw me out in the street myself. So the fact that big landlords and developers were starting to negotiate and they were leaving the most feral, the most fascist, the most insane faction in the real estate industry, which of course is the small property owners, so-called. These people are psychotic,
and,
right?
They break every law. I mean, we had to stop.
And they're like, oh, boo hoo hoo. We're not going to get to exploit people as badly as we used to. Wah, wah, wah. It's like
bust them, not good on the two, market rate apartments they're supposed to have on their fucking Southie conversion, and they put a hit on you and shit.
So these people, Chris, were furious that the bigger landlords were coming to the table. And now what do you think's going to happen in a state with, almost the entire legislature, one way or the other, in the pocket of real estate? This compromise is gone. It's all going to go away.
Props to Mike Conley, our friend in the legislature, who
was one of them. Yeah,
in 2024. Did I believe try to put forward legislation, doomed legislation, but solid legislation nonetheless that would give some leeway to municipalities as to how they deal with the rent control situation, and at least kind of loosen it up, from what I understand, a little bit. Not quite get us as far, and these kind of coalitions, I'm just glad that I'm not an organizer, have to deal with them. It's been difficult enough as a reporter over the years. I do wish that it went where I was definitely I was interested in looking into some other angles. Right now is looking, one thing I got to say, they did not have a good argument. The opposition did not have a great argument. They were very sober with it. It was not, doom as usual. It was just rent is a little bit out of control, but this isn't the way to do it, which I'm sure that's tried and tested. I don't know.
There's never a way to do it, of course, but all they got to do, it's much easier to destroy than to build, Chris, right? Is the old saying in politics as in life. And it's just a lot easier. This is how rent control was eliminated to begin with. Most folks had no idea about, they didn't even know what rent control was across most of Massachusetts in 1994. And of course, the real estate industry knew that. The only places it still existed at that time were Boston, Cambridge, and Brookline, and that was it. Somerville had it and gotten rid of it, I think, in the late 70s, and that was it. So it was not an issue for all the suburbanites and exurbanites and urbanites in smaller outlying parts of Massachusetts that hadn't had it, except there were parts of the state. The state had rent control around the World War II and other periods of great crisis, but it wasn't that it hadn't happened, but it had never really been a statewide thing in the modern era. And all the real estate industry had to do was basically cry communism and, they're trying to take our freedoms and, whatever. They didn't have to say anything coherent at all. They just had to say that this is a bad thing, and they had to put, as they did, millions and millions of dollars, 7 times as much as the housing advocates could bring to bear to defend rent control in that period. Yeah. And they just wiped the floor with them, and not by that much. The vote was relatively close, just a few percentage points, I think 4, right? They won by, to get rid of rent control. But that's all they have to do every time. Now it's you got people that are trying to do some kind of reform that's going to make it easier for renters in what is an inflationary economy. And because of the coming probably AI-driven collapse of the stock market and everything attached to it, we may be in really bad straits soon, even worse than now. And so this, people are trying to get some relief rent control is one way to do that. There are others that are more expensive for governments under the control of real estate industries, like building more housing, like with public money. This was kind of the low-hanging fruit, and now it's gone. And it's gone on a technicality that the supposedly more or less left-leaning SJC should be ashamed of themselves, for striking this down.
Speaking of God, I know that the many real estate holding companies are thanking God on this evening.
Well, they don't have to spend $30 million to defeat it now, which was what was, I think, estimated, right? And I should say, I should give kudos to the SJC for trying to hold the line against religion creep in government, and they were following the letter of the ballot, of Article 48 of the Constitution, whatever, on religion not being allowed in questions. Okay, fine. But, as the justices, one of them was saying, it was kind of down to they could have done it in such a way that they'd be setting precedent that they would, each individual question that had some religion in it somehow would have to be, examined on those grounds separately. It would be, each case would be individual. Whereas the way they did it retains a blanket rule, a blanket prescription. We could also say, to be fair, that it is a little bit surprising that the advocates didn't, that they're lawyers, and experienced people with ballots. And they have some. They have people that worked on the millionaires tax, which they got through pretty much the same coalition. How did they not know this was going to come up? I don't know.
Also,
we'll have to find out.
Well, I'm wondering if it was at, because if they already had, you've said this, we don't have a lot of giant roundtable discussions at BINJ. None of us really work well in groups like that, but I can almost see
I used to.
I can almost see the negotiation right now where they needed perhaps some religious elements of the coalition, the Catholics, I don't know, and some sort of bleeding heart group. And it already had nonprofit in the language, and they wanted religious institutions added as well. I don't know. But it does seem like a dramatic oversight. We're not here to. This is the kind. We're such nerds that this is the kind of conspiracy theory we would drum up that nobody would give a shit about anyway. But I got to say, it does. It is not fishy as much as just disappointing and stupid seeming.
Politics as usual. We're not trying to say the SJC is itself, automatically in the thrall of the real estate industry. That's not where we're going with this. But it is something that they could have said, yeah, all right, from now on, we'll just look at each case with religion and individually in the name of a better deal.
Yeah, but it's just
for renters.
They all have a nice place to sleep tonight. All the Supreme Court justice, all the SJC.
Yeah, the SJC justices. Yeah, I imagine they do, and I don't want to go beyond that. These are lawyers we're talking about with a lot of power, so I'm sure they do have nice houses.
It's just interesting as to, again, still I will stand by it. I don't think it's too petty to say that. I do think that the consideration is different when everyone, when a lot more real estate developers probably than you do people who could really benefit from rent control. I don't think that is. I don't think that's too. I don't think that's such a unfair assumption.
Right. Right.
With that said, like you did say, that it was a letter of the law kind of thing, but what really is? They're kind of there to interpret it, and it is interesting how it is. Let's face it, it is a smart competition. It's a game show, frankly. Who's got the smartest riff on some shit. That is what the SJC is, with this, the most brilliant legal minds in the land, and this is what they came up with, and this is what we all have to eat shit on. So I think
that the bright side, at least to the degree there is one, is that you didn't see a ballot question go up before the electorate and get shot down, which would have killed the prospects of any future ballot question on the same issue for many years by law. You can't just go. So now they can come back in the next session, and do it again.
Yeah.
Not the next session. The next year, I think. Next election, I should say.
We're certainly not going to see anything out of the legislature, which is just really.
Would that we were, Chris. Would that we were, but I just don't see it.
I just, at the very least, I think I like to see between the audit and this, people at least asking questions, even if people are on the other, whatever side of the rent control issue, like, hey, to your lawmaker, can we, hey, talk, engage these people. If you do see, if you're ever going to see them, it's going to be this summer at some farmer's market or some shit like that. And this is the time. Hey, about that audit, I can promise you, unless you live in a couple of places, like Cambridge, Somerville, certain parts of Cape Cod, the Berkshires, your lawmaker is trying to avoid and subvert the audit. So put them on the spot. Ask them. Have a friendly enough discussion, but ask them. Put it to them.
Yeah, and I think, if you have an opportunity where you live, I mean, we're seeing some pretty good, pretty cool looking politicians look likely to win in, Cambridge, Somerville, Boston, Medford, that kind of zone. That's helpful, including some different, there's going to be some shuffling with state reps and senators and stuff. That's probably good overall. It'll be nice if out there in the rest of the state, where there are many of what the Brits call rotten boroughs, in the UK, that are just like these do-nothing legislators that keep getting elected over and over and over again because people can't be bothered to, run anybody else against them or like vote for anybody else other than like, oh, I know him, he's a nice man, let's let me vote for him. I don't know nothing. It's like, please, people, come on, put a little more effort into it. Let's see some better legislators. I don't really care what party they're in. I just care that they're receptive to regular people's, sort of needs. Okay, I do kind of care if they're Republicans, but, given what's going on right now. But seriously, anybody who seems like decent on key issues like housing, education, food, etc., like decent meaning more money for programs that benefit regular people, improve schools, build more housing, make renting cheaper, whatever, any of that kind of stuff. Try to get those people in office, right? We might see a green politician, sometime. I mean, maybe the Pirate Party will have somebody.
A green or a
I don't know,
or we never know.
Whatever, like somebody decent.
If anybody's out there is able to pick up the latest
cover, a libertarian, I suppose.
Adbusters magazine. I think the most recent issue is this amazing front to back Pirate Party propaganda. It's fantastic. Pick it up, grab it if you can. Highly suggest.
Yeah. All right. I guess that wraps it up for
We got a lot
for this episode. Okay, folks, we'll be back. We assume, next Tuesday, probably at 8 p.m., although sometimes at other times, depending on when our guests can do it and we can do it. And we'll be, here on YouTube, etc. We'll cut some short videos. We'll stick them all over the place. If you see this, tell your friends, show it to them. If you have any ideas for us to have guests and stuff, let us know at info@binj.news, info@BINJ.NEWS. You know how to spell news. We'll see you in about a week or whatever. Peace. And